the Swansea Public Services Board Joint Committee. The first item on the agenda is election of chair for the 2020 to 21 municipal year. Do we have any nominations, please? Adam Hill?
Yeah, thank you. For the election of chair, I'd like to nominate Swansea Council, represented here today by Andrea Lewis.
Okay, and is that the leader and Andrea Lewis as joint chairs, or?
It is. We agreed at the previous meeting that it would be the organisation that would be the body represented by the leader, but today the leader is represented by Andrea.
Okay, that's great. Can I have a seconder for that, please?
I'd like to second that, please, Anne.
Thank you, Councillor Curtis. And do we have any other nominations? No? If you wouldn't mind, show of hands then for Swansea Council being the chair for the 2020-21 municipal year. If you don't have the show of hands facility, you can either show your hand or you can speak now. Okay. And do we have any abstentions? You can put your hands down. Any abstentions? No. And do we have anybody against that? Congratulations, Councillor Lewis. You're in the chair today. Thank you. I'll hand over for item 2 for you.
Thank you, everyone. And just to mention that my membership role on the committee has changed. I was a cabinet member on this committee, but now with the promotion of deputy leader, I'm really pleased and thank you all for your support as chair. I move on then to agenda item 2, which is the election of vice chair for the municipal year 2020-21. Do I have any nominations? Adam, your hand's up.
Thank you. Go with a good partnership as previously. I'd like to recommend the fire service through Roger Thomas as vice chair.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a seconder?
I'll second that as well, Andrea, please.
And do we have any other nominations? Okay, thank you. We'll go to the vote. All those in favour, if you could please raise your hands for Roger from the fire service. Thank you. And if you could now lower your hands, and any abstentions? And anyone against? Okay, congratulations, Roger. You are duly elected as chair. So we'll move on to welcome and apologies for absence. Alison, do we have any apologies for today?
Yeah, from Councillor Rob Stewart and Sean Harrop-Griffiths from the Health Board.
Okay, thank you. Welcome, everyone. I know there are a number of us on the call. Do you want me to go around everyone and everybody give an introduction? There's quite a few of us, so it could take quite some time and we've got quite a busy agenda. If you're all happy, what I will do is ask you, if you do speak, if you could just give a brief introduction, who you are and which body or organisation you represent. I think it's probably swifter to do it that way. So thank you very much for that. On to any disclosures of personal or prejudicial interest. I'm not seeing any indication from anyone. Phil?
Sorry, I hadn't put my mic on. Sorry, Chair. Just wanted to raise that on item 11 in relation to funding from NRW, that Swansea Environmental Forum would be one of the potential beneficiaries.
Okay, thank you. Will you be staying in the meeting, or is it just a personal interest?
I would hope to stay in the meeting at the time.
Okay, thank you, Phil. Adam?
Thank you. It's just with regard to clarification with what Phil was saying. So the item 11 can only be voted on by the 4 statutory members anyway. for this joint committee. So therefore, his interest is one of just a spectator role in that particular area. It will just be the 4 statutory partners who will just agree, hopefully, to those funding bids going forward.
Thank you, Adam. That's really helpful. So moving on then to the minutes of the previous meeting. First of all, for accuracy, is everybody content that they are an accurate record? Not seeing any dissent, so thank you for that. And on to agenda item 6, update on actions from the previous meeting. Looking at Adam.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the first action, there was unfortunately just a timing delay in getting a response through. So certainly with regard to the early years group, that there isn't a desire at the moment to extend that. They've had a look at the years and decided that at the current time it is fit for purpose. Should that change in the future, they would bring a report back. So it was just to say that they really wanted to look at it. So no change there. And rather than a letter being written, a conversation was had with Welsh Government because there was no right of reply at that time to respond. So I undertook a verbal discussion with the relevant directors.
Okay, thank you, Adam. Any questions on that? Can't see anybody indicating. Okay, on to public questions. We haven't had any public questions received. So that takes us very neatly onto the Older People's Commissioner report, which is a verbal report. And I'd like to welcome the Older People's Commissioner to the meeting today. And I believe that you also have an officer with you as well. So welcome, and handing over to you.
Andrea, thanks very much. And yes, I'm here with my colleague, Dave McKinney. So thanks very much for inviting us to your meeting today. And we're meeting in Strange, aren't we? So I think the first thing I want to do is just to acknowledge that, really, and also to thank all of you for all the work you've been doing to support older people during this dreadful pandemic. We are in a really challenging time, and I know our public services and our voluntary and community organisations have been doing a huge amount. What I've come to talk to you today about is something that we started discussing with the council some time ago, actually, about working with you in your development as an age-friendly city. And we were due to come to a meeting of the Public Services Board some time ago before the pandemic hit. So I thought what would be useful is just to kind of update on that, talk a little bit about what's happened over the last 6 months and some of the actions I think we need to take forward. And then propose a way forward with you, really. So I met with Phil Roberts and other colleagues over last year and early this year to talk about the work that I'm doing with a number of local authorities across Wales to help support them to develop as age-friendly communities. In other words, places where there are no barriers to older people living independently, taking part in local communities and living well into their older age. And across the world, there is a network of age-friendly communities that the World Health Organization supports. But at the moment, there are no places in Wales that are members of that international community. And actually, we have a lot to share about what we do well, and we also have a lot to learn. So what I've been doing is beginning conversations with local authorities about developing this work here in Wales, developing a community of practice for ourselves in Wales, but also linking into that international network. So if we then think about the impact of the last 6 months on older people, and all of us will have felt this either, well, probably both personally and professionally, I think, but we know it's been an incredibly difficult and challenging time for many older people, many of whom have been struggling to stay well, to stay connected in their local communities. And I did a number of engagement sessions with about 16 of them across Wales, virtually, sadly, at the moment, but including people from Swansea, to hear directly from older people and public bodies and organisations about the sorts of things that need to happen now for older people. And I summarised this in my report called Leave No One Behind, because one of the messages I had for many older people was a worry about being left behind either because it's difficult to some people aren't digitally connected, so they can't take part in things like this or in keeping in touch, but also a worry that as we eventually come through the pandemic, that older people might actually be the people who are left behind. And we've seen, haven't we, how important local communities have been during this period, from making sure you get supplies and medicines and information to that sort of human contact as well. So one of the things I've set out is I think we now need to make sure that our communities are age friendly and that there are no barriers to older people taking part. So just to give some examples of the things that older people raised with me, quite a lot of practical things. For example, making sure there are enough benches and seating available so that you can actually walk to the shop or the bus stop or wherever it is you're going. Making sure that our pavements are safe, our street lighting is good. Making sure that our shops and businesses are aware of any particular needs you might have, for example, if you have dementia. And I think there's a danger at this point that quite a lot of older people could be excluded, not deliberately, but just because the right things aren't in place. So what I've suggested is that we need to be undertaking some audits of our local communities to make sure they are age friendly, to make sure the physical environment is enabling older people to participate and be included. Now, we know that Swansea actually has made fantastic progress over the last few years towards age-friendly status. You signed the Dublin Declaration back in 2014, and your Ageing Well plan has also been really positive. So I think you're very well placed actually to be one of the leading communities on this movement. And I'm coming to you with an offer, therefore. As I said at the beginning, we're developing a community of practice in Wales so we can share learning about what works, about helping older people in our communities, what works about getting rid of the barriers that stop older people participating. So an offer to take part in that community of practice so we can share learning, but also an offer to support you in making an application to the World Health Organization network to be recognised as an age-friendly city and to take part in that international network. As I said, I think that's both about you sharing some of the good practice that you're doing, but importantly, drawing on that learning from elsewhere. We've had a great working relationship with a number of people across Swansea, including your Life Stages team, and would seek to continue to build on that. I do think we're at a place where there are many risks out there for older people, not just the risk posed by COVID itself, but the non-COVID harms from isolation, from exclusion, from fear, actually, that some older people have expressed to me about what is happening and the ways in which their lives have changed. I think if we can spread this age-friendly concept, if we can do these practical things in our local community to help older people stay engaged and connected, we will go a long way forward to managing those risks. So that's why I wanted to come to you today to really give you a very quick overview of the work and to hope that we can take some steps forward together on this to do more to build this city age-friendly communities, and really to look at how we can make sure that older people aren't left behind as we kind of navigate the very, very complex path ahead of us. Thanks, Andrea.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. And I think members on the group today will appreciate the sentiments of what you've expressed and the concerns, particularly around people feeling isolated and how we engage with our older communities to listen to them and for them to have the ability to feed in what they would like to see, I think is going to be a key part of that. I'm going to open it up to questions. Does anybody have any questions for the Commissioner? Adam?
Yeah, it's not so much a question. It's sort of just really fascinating and brilliant that you've highlighted that, and certainly some of the good work that we do. Later on, we'll be talking about community impact assessments, of which we're talking about a city for well-being. and in light of that, that is one aspect that we want to make sure that we capture. So it's really encouraging to hear that's where you want to go and that's where we want to be. So there's a real meeting there in terms of where the future's going. So yeah, fully support and look forward to working more closely with you in the future.
That's great. Thanks, Adam.
Roger?
Yeah, thanks, Helena. That was really great to have you on board on here and to hear your views back into the group. I just think from a personal perspective, from the fire service, we've had to adapt clearly in terms of our community safety messaging. And whereas we would have that sort of face-to-face over the threshold types of approach, we've had to adapt that clearly in light of the current, as with other partners as well. But I think one of the sad stories, or the sad type of stories we're hearing, is that when we are engaging, sometimes individuals won't have had any contact with the outside world for many weeks, which is really concerning. And added onto that, then when we talk to partners in other blue light services as well, particularly the police, the impact and the how vulnerable a lot of these individuals are, particularly from scammers and undesirable types in terms of that sort of approach as well. So I think there's a lot of work to do. That, as you say, the landscape's changed, and I think we need to change it as well. So yeah, really thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. No, I agree with you, and I think the fire rescue services are providing an incredibly important service, and I think that preventative work you've done with many older people in terms of fire safety has been important. I mean, I would just pick up the issue of financial scams. I think the issue of older people during the pandemic has also been a cause for concern. And I've been working with about 30 organisations across Wales seeking to take action on this, both to increase awareness of the risks of abuse, but also to do more to make sure the right support services are there. And sadly, we know that many people have taken, many criminals have taken advantage of this time, haven't they, in terms of new financial scams, which have a devastating effect on people. It's not just the money, is it? It's the sense of the way in which you've been tricked into something, that the kind of how it can make you feel very vulnerable. So that's certainly something that we're working on. And I would agree with you about the sense in which our environment has changed, and we need to work out together how we can enable older people to continue to take part and not to be so isolated. I'm sure all of us on this meeting share a concern about the coming months and the winter, and that really exacerbating some of the problems that people have been experiencing. So, working together, looking at what works, looking at how we can make a difference together, I think it's never been more important, really.
Thank you. I've got Sean and then Joe. I think Sean might be having difficulties unmuting.
Hi, sorry, is that me, Sean Denty?
Yes, please.
Oh, I'm not sure that I've got my hand up, sorry.
Oh,
maybe
I had an indication that, sorry, I thought I saw an indication that you'd raised your hand. Apologies. Over to you, Joe.
Okay, so thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much. It's just to provide some reassurance, really, that certainly the elderly and older communities have featured within our community impact work locally within the police in terms of online exploitation, criminality, fraud and other related offences. I think one of the important things as well is how we communicate with the elderly group. We've got so many people who are very tech savvy and use our mobile platforms and social media platforms to communicate, but I think we have to be really careful that we don't exclude some other groups who may not have access to that technology as well. Particularly things like libraries being perhaps a bit more restricted now with travelling and local restrictions and things like that. That accessibility may not be there.
I agree with you, and we know that 41% of people over the age of 75 are not online. So there's a significant group of people who are excluded. As you rightly say, some of them might have been able to get help through their library. So the fact that some of those community assets have also had to be shut have made it much more difficult. But it's great to hear about the work that you're doing.
Thank you. I've got Amanda.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on some of the safeguarding concerns. Certainly in recent months and weeks, particularly since shielding is paused, as SCVS and sort of providing voluntary support to people, we definitely have seen a massive increase in safeguarding issues. Obviously, we follow the procedures and report what we can, but we've also seen a huge number of people who are concerned to raise their, they don't want to report their concerns basically because they're still in a dependency relationship with the people who are exploiting them. So there's also that kind of just feeding that in really in terms of it's not all being dealt with as we would hope it would be.
No, it's made it much more difficult, hasn't it? Because people haven't necessarily been able to get away in the same way that they have before from an abusive relationship, even to make a call safely or to get in to have a conversation with somebody else. So it's, you know, we know Welsh Government has actually been doing a lot of work more generally on communications around where people can go for help on abuse. And we're doing some specific work at the moment looking at particularly the issue of older people who need to leave abusive relationships and not necessarily having the right places to go in terms of accommodation and support, because a lot of our refuges are not really geared up to older people who might have care needs. So we're looking at what is available at the moment, and are there some specific accommodation support services that we need to look at across Wales actually to help older people who are in abusive relationships and need to leave, but for whom a refuge really wouldn't be appropriate. So absolutely right. I think the pandemic has exacerbated some of these issues. And also, and one of my concerns is that we still don't know exactly what's going on behind closed doors with a lot of people. And I think we might see some of this emerge over the coming months in terms of what people have been trying to cope with potentially on their own, because the usual people who might be able to see them or check on them hasn't been able to happen. So a huge area where we're, as I said, we are working with a number of organisations to take action on that. And any insights or kind of ways of working that you've found that are really tackling that well, it'd be very good to hear about, because I think this is an issue for most organisations across Wales at the minute.
Thank you. Yes, I was just thinking exactly the same thing, that this is clearly, from the comments from members today, an issue which spans all sectors and all organisations. Welcome the offer of support for a bid to the WHO. I think that's really something that would be really useful, and I'm sure the conversations will continue. I can't see any other questioners, so it just remains for me to thank you very much for attending today and for your verbal update. You're more than welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting, and as Adam has said, in a timely, apt manner, the next item on our agenda is community impact assessment, so you might want to stay and hear that. So
thank you. I'll definitely stay for that next item. That sounds very helpful. And just thanks again, and do get back in touch on any of the issues I've raised. And what we'd like to do is just follow this up with a note to sort of take forward that work to support you with that World Health Organization application, and something positive in a difficult time. I think it would be great for you to get that recognition really for the work you're doing.
Thank you so much. So with that, I'll move on to agenda item 9, which is the community impact assessment. Over to you, Adam.
Thank you. I won't say too much. I'm going to bring Steve King in, really, who's going to talk a bit about this, and then I'll come in on the end of it. But you'll remember that a number of probably months ago now, we asked members to send in what work they've been undertaking in terms of community impact, what's changed in the world, and to try and pull out some key themes. So Steve will talk to you a bit now about what we went through, and then I'll come in at the end just to highlight the sort of the streams that we think will come out of that for discussion. Steve?
Yeah, thank you, Adam. Thank you, Chair. I just sort of thought I'd run through just a quick sort of background to this, just perhaps partly for those who weren't here last time. Sort of just to go through where this really came from initially, I think, over the last few months. Mention a couple of things. One of which was Welsh Government writing to all PSB chairs in Wales, recognising the role of PSBs in responding to the impacts on communities through of COVID-19. There was also Welsh Government hosted a recovery workshop in the summer, which I joined, and that sort of ran through with some good examples of practice elsewhere in Wales. And we've also been participating with some work in a very light touch way, admittedly, but Neath Talbot have been doing some early work on this as well, via a data and research group which they've established, and we were sort of invited to sort of observe, I guess, and contribute where we can to that. So you know, there's a general awareness that other PSBs and organisations are doing work on the community impact of COVID-19, and then from that, I mean, as Adam mentioned, we had our own recovery workshop following the last PSB meeting in August, which was meant to share partner experiences of the impact of the pandemic, and also looking at the path from at that time response to recovery. And of course, we know since then perhaps we're going back in the other direction again with things that are happening. Anyway, following this, as Adam mentioned, a set of questions were sent for partners looking at organisations' priorities, and some questions around community impact analysis. And we received responses from a number of partners, which I think were emailed separately to the board earlier this week. I've sort of they've been included as they were received back, plus a short summary on each as I saw the main themes coming from that. Now, from these responses, I've since been working on putting some of that came up through those responses primarily into the PESTLE format, which is an analysis tool, if I can get this right: political, economic, social, technological, legal, and environmental. So you'll see on page 2 of the report, just the issues sort of on a page, really, in box form. And in the following pages, I've gone into a bit more detail on most of the items as far as I could, and following a set format on that, on the impact of the issue, the evidence I could find around it, on the policy implications of that issue. Now, clearly, it's not a full community impact assessment by any means, you know, compared to what some other areas in Wales have done and what I've seen. And definitely, we've not captured all the massive range of issues and impacts that this pandemic is having. For example, the political and legal sections, there's clear gaps in that table, when, you know, that there would be certainly things that could go in there if this was done again. And also, I recognise as well that there'd be gaps in the sections that do appear to have a lot of content in them. And also, this work so far basically represents essentially my resource and time that I've had able to sort of put into this since the last meeting, in amongst other things, to bring it to the point that you see now. And I have to admit that my knowledge on a lot of these subject areas is far from deep in any way, and I've been doing a lot of digging and investigating and learning a few new things along the way. So the other thing I would say as well, that even in the weeks since I sort of wrote this piece of work, that the whole context around the pandemic has changed. So you can go back to read something even a week later and you think that doesn't really reflect the current position in some way. You know, evidence changes all the time, and there's other sort of things which there's limitations that around some of the data that's gone in there. I mean, it's a mixture of sources. There's a mixture of published statistics and research. There are some national and local issues as well, which again depends on the availability of information. Another difficulty is that some of the issues only have data in them that relate to the pre-March period. So with data time lags, you're always playing catch up, and some of this stuff hasn't really caught up yet. And on the other hand, some of the information that I put in the report has already become out of date by new data that's come out, but that's the nature of these things. So, with the time restrictions we have today, I wasn't going to go into any depth on any of the issues, in the report. I think that some of them are probably a half-day meeting in themselves. And I appreciate that it's not a far from complete or in any way polished piece of work, but we would welcome any further feedback anybody has on it, whether it's in the time we have now or following the meeting, and where we can to improve on it as a piece of work. It will potentially serve a useful purpose if we can develop it a little in the context of the well-being assessment that we have to contemplate doing shortly, but I'll not dwell on that for now. So that's about as much as I wanted to say on it for now, really. So happy for Adam to carry on or to take any points, any queries.
Great.
He wants to raise right now.
Thanks, Steve. That's really helpful. I'll just move it on a little further. If we remember back from where this came from, was to try and focus the PSB into an area that said what's happened in terms of COVID, the response to COVID, what's going to happen living with COVID, because this isn't going to go away anytime soon. And thirdly, what do we need to focus on that was either before COVID or looking forwards that we can do to make a difference in the community? So utilising the work that Steve's done, and that can be nuanced even further. And then the strategic leads met in order to utilise that information and look at where else we could go. What are the bigger factors that are affecting us in terms of the statutory partners, the economic well-being of Swansea, where we're going on the environment, and we sort of melted all that down to what we think are 3 strategic objectives for us to sort of focus on. These will need unpacking further by the work streams, but the first one being City for Wellbeing and Wildlife. So I'm not going to unpack this too far, but that well-being is everything that we've just talked about with Helena first, in terms of the older people. How do we look at the youth? How do we look at that well-being in terms of mental health, that access to services? So it's how could we be that true city for well-being? But also, one of the things that we've definitely seen through COVID is access to green space, wildlife, our own gardens, planting, seed exchange, all the things that actually have kept communities and individuals in some sort of balanced way to reground themselves. So that would be the first stream. The second one would be something around the green / climate change agenda, because that is something that we do need to focus on. We, certainly as a council, we've already declared a climate emergency. There's a lot of work already being done, but actually that needs to coordinate more with private sector, voluntary sector, where we go with blue light services, and actually pull it all together into a more coherent drive forward than perhaps we've got at the moment with all organisations doing their own thing. So that's about how do we use the PSB to help lead on that climate change green agenda. And then the final one is something that's blighted our lives for some time. Again, a lot of good work's been undertaken by the partnership through the Safer Swansea partnership, and that's that county line substance misuse, antisocial behaviour. And again, what could we do to join up, not only with our PSB, but we've already started to look to Neathport Talbot on a regional footprint, because it doesn't just affect us in Swansea. They've got to come into Swansea and go out of Swansea. So how can we as a PSB both look at that locally and regionally and nationally? So they were the 3 sort of headlines that came out, which was kind of felt like it gave us something to really focus on. And if we could then take those away now to the work streams to say, what does that mean to each of the 4 quadrants and where can they add true value, joining up in terms of partnership together, and then feeding back an action plan of some really big hitters, not another 103 different little projects that we want to work on. This is what if we could do one thing but do it well, what would we do? And if we could do sort of 3 of those per work stream, and that's the focus for the next 12 months. So it is about moving this forward and not entering into long debate and long work groups. This is almost a quick and dirty. These are the issues. Let's get something that will make a difference and then deliver. So I think today it's sort of getting in principle support that those 3 agenda items are acceptable to the PSP core group, and then from here sending that back to each of the work streams in order to deliver on some key objectives within each of those 3. Okay. That's it, Chair.
Thank you, Adam, and thank you to Steve. Before I bring Martin in, just to comment specifically about the climate emergency element. As the cabinet lead for the council, we've done quite a considerable amount of work examining what we've done, what we're doing and what we should be doing, and compiling an action plan. And part of that process has been the intention to ask partner organisations to sign up to a climate change charter and to construct their own action plans applicable to their own organisations, but also looking at potential for collaboration across organisations as well. And that could be, for example, co-procurement of green vehicles or sharing EV infrastructure. So we're looking at that, and I think that's an area that partners could really get their teeth into and really get some really positive outcomes. So I'm particularly passionate about that particular item, and as you know, I'm also now involved with tackling substance misuse, and completely agree that it should be a regional health board. Swansea and Neath Tarbert have equally got issues. I know we've got Joe on the line today. And there's really some gains to be made in trying to tackle that one, because we know the impact, the detrimental impact that's having on our communities. I'm going to shut up now and I'm going to hand over to Martin.
Thank you, Chair, and congratulations on your appointments, Chair, today. Thanks.
And
Thank you. Well, Adam's clearly had an extra week to fix this morning because he outlined those 3 options of why we should take them forward very eloquently. So thanks for that, Adam, and I obviously support that really, because the analysis that Steve brought to us just earlier is spot on as well. Appreciate, in compiling it, Steve, neither you nor ourselves really have had a chance to fully digest exactly what it might mean for us, because as you say, things move week to week, and we will learn some more as this COVID experience kind of continues to occupy our time here. But let's use the learning and put it in the context, as Adam suggested earlier. Fact that, certainly from my perspective, before COVID came along, we already had a climate emergency, as did we a nature emergency, and the likes of yourselves, Andreas and Authority were already trying to address that. But what it's done is bring these things into really sharp focus for us. So when I looked, we made a contribution to the E in PESL. We were thinking very much about the learning that we've gained from the experience here, and from my perspective, what it's done is, it's sharpened up the inequalities around there. And part of our job as an organisation is to, help tackle and address health inequalities by equalising out the opportunity, for example. And that's really sharpened that up, because what we've learned, and seen through COVID is that natural environment is a really important outlet for communities and people when they're faced with the challenges we have now. So it's just it is for people, and you can see how people have flocked to beaches and out into our woodlands and forests and our public and open spaces during the period. And that's great, really, because it's rekindled an interest that people already had or had forgotten, but the constraints of COVID had just made that so important. So let's take that learning forward and leave some things behind, because it's also flagged up how unsustainably we were all living, with commuting times, time spent in the car, getting to work and back from work and everything. Yes, it's got some different challenges now, working as we are remotely today. And I would just ask us to rethink, how our response goes. You hear Boris Johnson say, "Let's build ourselves out of this." Well, I just suggest that the economic response shouldn't be to do more of the same, because we've learned when we wouldn't be taking that learning forward then, and I can see that that's already lodged in the brains of all us around the table here. But that done this assessment is emphatically demonstrated, I think, in what Steve took us through earlier. So things like, we've managed to maintain our monitoring of blue flag beaches this year, monitoring our water quality, because that blue flag status of our beaches across South West Wales will be key to economic recovery next year, because it'll help bring that advertising and branding effort back into Wales, and it'll encourage people to spend and help job creation and job retention there. So I would just go along with those three proposals. Really, they're just really important. I think you've got them spot on, and thanks, Steve, for your supporting analysis there. I'd encourage us to just adopt those.
Thank you, Martin. I've got Jan, then Joanne, and then I think Steve put his hand up. So Jan.
Sorry, Anne, I wasn't going to ask questions, just having difficulty hearing Martin. I was just going to ask if anybody else was having the same issue. He was very, very quiet.
Yes, I was listening intently.
I know. I could see a few of us were struggling. That's what I was trying to say. Sorry.
Thanks, Jan. Joanne?
Yeah, I was just going to reflect on a couple of things, really. Don't have a problem with the what's being proposed. I think we just need to recognise that the second phase that we're going into is not presenting the same as the first wave of COVID, and therefore the challenges and where it's likely to hit may well be different. So I think it's absolutely right to be reflecting on the learning from the first wave, but it's also right to be reflecting and trying to think ahead to if we're seeing what some of the differences are, for example, how the different age groups are being affected, some of the behaviours that we're seeing that are different now from previously. There's something about sort of also prospectively looking at, so what are the things that we might need to change our views on, bearing in mind what happened last time and how things are going forward. And I think we have to be realistic about timescales as well, because, if we're talking about realistically any antidote or vaccine not being available till next summer, then that's a protracted period. We already feel, I think we're all exhausted and feel it's been a protracted period to date. If it's an even longer, if we've got longer to go before that stage than we've been through already, that is going to be quite devastating for lots of people who are kind of working on the give it a few weeks and we'll be over the worst sort of rationale. So I think that whole how we can support people to be resilient in the meantime, because this isn't going to be another couple of months. This isn't going to be about, getting people for, well, once we get to the new year, it'll all be fine or whatever. That's unlikely to be the case. So I don't want to be a harbinger of doom, which I have been accused of on various occasions, Adam. But it's just trying to be realistic, because I think there are things we can do to support people in the meantime. And to coordinate better. But it's important we're realistic in doing that, and that we're not being too optimistic, because otherwise it will be another downer for people, to be honest, because those expectations are really important to people at the moment. And it's important we don't over-egg them, because otherwise people will come crashing down again.
Thank you. I think that's a very relevant point. We know that furlough is ending the end of this month. We know that we're going to see, or we are expecting and anticipating significant hikes in unemployment levels, and SMEs really struggling. So I think the landscape is going to change, and possibly not for the better, and it's how we prepare for that. So it's a really valid point. I've got Adam. I'm sorry, I can only see one hand up on my screen because I've only got several of you on my screen. So I'll bring in Adam, and then if anybody's got your hand up, please feel free to come in afterwards.
And Andrew, just to be gentlemanly like I am, Joe's had her hand up for a little while. So if you take Joe first, Joe Moll, and then I'll come in after that.
Yeah, sorry, Joe, I can't see your hand from my screen. And if I start looking at hands, I start going sideways, apparently, on my phone, and everybody gets upset by that.
Thanks, Andrea. No problem. Thank you, Adam. You are a true gent. I was just going to say a few things, similar lines to Joe Abbott-Davis, really. I think we still need to be totally flexible in how we react here, because we are flip-flopping at the moment between response and recovery. And as time goes on, you know, we do have to have that flexible response. I think one of the other things which I think is perhaps wearing a little more thin now compared to where we were at the start of the pandemic is perhaps public tolerance and cooperation with services. You know, we're seeing a lot of the fake news, this is a conspiracy, and some angst towards government, local government, and, you know, those kind of public protests are probably going to gather a lot more momentum as well. So I think apart from the actual communities that we can see are being directly impacted, I think the community as a whole is having or are having changes and shifts in their perceptions and their views on coronavirus in general. I think in terms of the areas that Adam spoke about earlier, obviously I can talk for days on county lines. I won't do that because of the time constraints, but I think it is probably worth pointing out that certainly that has not stopped through COVID. That's one of the biggest areas that has continued with absolute vengeance. But equally, we haven't stopped enforcing either. So the police are the only ones that can do that element of it, the enforcing, but we do rely heavily on other partners for intelligence gathering and, you know, various other aspects of tackling that. And the joint Public Services Board, which the meeting is actually tomorrow, for those who remember, the original critical incident group came out of the need and desire to try to tackle county lines across both county boroughs, because whilst, as I said just now, the police are the only ones who can enforce and deal with the county lines, there were other elements that were getting in the way that may have been preventing the police from doing those things, such as missing children, you know, attendance at A&E and all of those things, which I won't trip out again. But, you know, to try to reassure people, we do link up quite a lot, as Adam was talking about, across other county boroughs, across other police forces and nationally. So you will have seen in the news in recent months, Operation Venetic, which was a national crime agency, drug-related enforcement activity. Locally here, we'd certainly had some interventions on individuals and groups that would have featured in Op Venetic had we dragged our heels. So that was really, you know, good for us to see that the activity we'd undertaken, we are tackling those gangs and those individuals that would have featured on a national operation, but we were into them already. So, you know, I think to provide some reassurance, we liaise very, very closely with the Midlands, Merseyside and the Met in particular. And we are looking at all elements of safeguarding. So some of our cases fall out of missing children or somebody not having a ticket on a train, and then the inquiries that we then build upon those do result in county lines disruption. So, you know, if anyone's got any questions or if you want any further information on the work that we've been doing on that, I'm more than happy to provide that at any point.
Thank you, Joe. Adam?
Yeah, thanks. Again, won't reiterate what everybody said. Totally agree. What I really want to move this away from is this isn't a COVID recovery or response. That's not what we're talking about. What we're really talking about is where can the PSB come together, utilise its skills outside of what we're already doing. So all the agencies, you know, nobody's stopped, you know, as we've heard from Joe, you know, continued through, been working on contests in terms of radicalisation, we've talking community safety, county lines, none of that stopped. If we look at what the voluntary sector are doing in terms of support, that's continued. This is another layer really on top of that, is going, how can we now add further value through those three areas, City for Wellbeing and Wildlife, Green Climate Change and County Lines, etc. How can we go a stage further and build even greater either resilience or response? So we think about you know, this COVID, we've also got EU exit that's about to hit us. Again, what's that going to do for our older population? What's that going to do with transport? What about, you know, isolation, scams that are going to come through? We've already seen lots of scams for elderly coming in to do a check on the houses for COVID or for being ready for Brexit. So again, there's lots of other things that we need to be mindful of. COVID is only one part of what we're responding to, and there's already the SCG. We've already got the recovery group from the South Wales Local Resilience Forum. We've already got the gold silvers from the Health Board. So COVID for me is kind of, we're on it. It's what else we can do as a PSB to add real value to our community by joining together across those 3 work streams. So it's not to replace what we already do. This is really going on a stage further, finding something big. You know, if we could solve the isolation problem for the elderly by improving transport links safely in a COVID world, imagine how good that would feel. If we could get more green space accessible for people, how good would that be? So it's those kind of things rather than responding to the COVID emergency, which is kind of being done already by all partners coming together.
Okay, thank you, Adam. I can't see any other hands up. Is there anybody else wishing to speak? Okay, so are we all happy to accept the areas that have been recommended? Not seeing any dissent. Okay, thank you, Adam. I think that's a yay from the board. Jan? I think you raised your hand, Jan.
Sorry, Anne, I was only going to speak in support of that, but I can't get my hand down. It keeps staying up. Sorry.
No problem at all. We often have problems with these buttons sticking on these calls. Okay, thank you, Jan. Okay, so that moves us swiftly on to the local wellbeing assessment. So who is leading on this item?
Okay, well, again, I'll just do a very quick introduction and then Steve can take over. Many of you will be aware that there was already a local wellbeing assessment. We're just at that time again where we need to start thinking about doing it all over again. Is this the right time? We may ask ourselves in terms of Brexit, COVID and everything else. However, there's currently a need for us to do it, regardless of whether we think we should or shouldn't. We do need to do something, or at least start thinking towards it. We're still waiting for guidance from Welsh Government on the preparation of the wellbeing assessments and what that will look like through their review. So we can't kick this off just yet, but Steve will talk to you a bit more about the wellbeing assessment and the bits around it, and then there will be a plea from me at the end. Over to you, Steve.
Thank you, Adam. I say I'm conscious of time, and I won't. I mean, the report says pretty much what I'd want to say, really. I mean, it sort of sets out the, you know, for those again not perhaps familiar, from all the trials and tribulations of well, not quite 5 years ago, but getting close to, just the context in terms of the Act and the requirements as we now know them, and as Adam said, we're not sure whether that will change and to what degree yet. We were hoping for something this autumn, but there's no immediate sign from Welsh Government yet. So, as rightly said, you know, it is an issue perhaps of just starting to think about things rather than ploughing on full steam ahead when you might sort of do some work which all of a sudden is in the wrong direction. Anyway, the report, as I said, it recaps what we did last time around, how the document was organised in terms of a structure which again fell out of former local service board priorities for the most part. So I run through perhaps some of the options that we could follow for the high level structure of the document, should we want to move away from that, with perhaps a little summary of what other PSBs did last time around.
Sorry, Steve, just before we continue, has everyone got access to the papers?
It should have been in a link that went out a week or so ago, an email.
I can usually read people quite well on here, and lots of people are looking kind of blank. So I was just wondering, because I obviously saw in a very early version, and I'm just looking at people now who are scrabbling to PCs. So I'm not sure everyone's got it.
Right.
There's a PDF that's linked to the agenda online, to the online agenda papers.
Yeah, it was sent out, Chair, with the papers, and I've got to say, for those who haven't read it, they've missed a treat, because Steve has produced a very useful report there.
Thank you, Phil. So again, it sort of mainly provides a recap of mainly how it was done last time around, and perhaps some options for how we might think about doing it this time around. And one of the things that we will need to come to at some point is how we sort of, as well as how the work is structured in terms of content, how we sort of organize it, sort of in terms of, you know, whether it involves a new group, a reconstituted old group, or different levels of group, maybe, because we one of the suggestions that we've been thinking about is perhaps having a smaller group, sort of mainly sort of bringing together the editorial of the multitude of content that we could potentially consider, and a sort of wider level research forum, for want of a better phrase, I've called it at the moment. So again, these things are all flagged up as issues to think about, rather than something perhaps that we need to decide today. And obviously there are things bubbling away in the background that we need to be mindful of as well. One of the things I mentioned there is the population assessment under the Social Services and Wellbeing Act is also required in roughly the same sort of time frame. And perhaps we need to perhaps develop our thinking on that into terms of how we can feasibly dovetail some of that work, because I don't think we were quite successful at it last time around. And the other things I mentioned, you know, which isn't going to be a surprise to anyone, is the impact that COVID-19 will have both on logistically doing this work and the issues that feed into it as well. I mean, everything seems to be viewed through a lens of COVID-19 at the moment, but that's obvious to everyone. And as Adam said, final thing is we're still waiting that Welsh Government advice, which may or may not come around soon. We're just wait and see. So again, just welcome any initial views anybody has, and if there isn't anything much more to say at this stage, then perhaps we can come to the next or soon after meeting with another update when we perhaps have firmed things up.
Thank you, Steve. There's a number of speakers. I'll bring Adam back in, but I'm not sure whether members have got access to the mod.gov app. But I think if you haven't, it's well worth downloading, because all the publicly accessible documents are available on that. So Adam?
Thanks. Yeah, a couple of things. Apologies if people didn't see it embedded within the agenda pack. Again, we'll have a look at that for future, just to signpost where things are so that people can see it. Steve's given an excellent overview there. This is coming really for visibility at this stage. That's why we're bringing it to you, to say this is on the horizon. When we did the last one, 2017, we were in a different place with a lot of different resources. And, you know, the council even at that point had sort of analysts or a lot more analysts. And we've now got Steve, you know, we've got quality rather than quantity now. So there is going to be an ask here across the partnership to look for resources. Now, that might be in terms of people. Many of our resources across this partnership will have analysts or researchers or specialists that will be able to feed into this. So it will be, again, looking at a collegiate approach from all partners in order to feed into this. It's not so much money we're after as expertise and people that can do some of this work and probably be guided by us as a structure, but putting that together. So it's coming here to say it's coming over the horizon. people are starting to do budgets, looking ahead, looking at where they're going to go over the next sort of 12 months. It's to say, please start building this in now and not waiting, because there will be an ask. And when it is, if you haven't built it in, we will still need you to contribute somehow to doing this. It's not a council wellbeing assessment. It's the PSB, it's the community wellbeing assessment. So as such, we all have a duty and a responsibility. So it's really saying that. If you haven't had a chance to read it, I appreciate some of you probably haven't, please do, because it will give you the background that you need in order to look at that direction of travel that we're going in. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Adam. I'll go to Joanne and then Martin.
Yeah, so having been involved in the last one, which was altogether a very painful experience in my own personal view, but anyway, I guess a plea for a few things. I recognise the reality that there is an expectation. I guess I would ask some specific things, which is around, so in terms of the assessment we did last time, warts and all, what do we think will have changed? I suspect very little, apart from the significant impact of COVID. So I guess I'm keen not to spend an inordinate amount of time pulling the stuff together to do the assessment. Personally, I would rather we put our resources, as Adam says, and commit those into actually doing and changing things which we already know are problems, rather than in doing an assessment to identify the same problems that we already know and have assessed and worked out that we've got. So it's not about a lack of commitment to the principle. It's about, for me, I would like to see a truly joined up approach taken to the population assessment, the Nice-Talbot wellbeing assessment and this one, because I will end up being asked 3 times to do everything. And to be honest, that is unhelpful, I think, from everyone's point of view, and for a number of other organisations as well. So I think everything that we can do that makes that simpler and easier and quicker to do, the better. But personally, for me, aside from the particular challenge of the pandemic and the impacts that will have, I would be surprised if an awful lot has changed. And therefore, I would prefer us to focus on so what are we going to do about it, and what are the actions that we as a PSB uniquely can contribute to as part of that, and that we focus on that.
Thank you, Joanne. I'll bring you back in now. Do you want me to take the other points first? And then
if I could just take that one I'll sort of just, if I can, address some. I think Joe's absolutely right. What will have changed? Not massively, but there are some big things, and we're not quite sure yet of what that impact will be. So COVID definitely one. EU exit, we don't quite know what that's going to mean for us. So there's another big one. We look at the climate change agenda, which has come in as well, and that wasn't there at the time. So again, that's another big hitter. And then the wider picture of the economy, number of people unemployed, number of SMEs. So I don't think it's anything we're not alive to, but I think they're the big ticket items that will have changed. But we ought to apply that to what we already know and almost check what we had in 2017 rather than re-establish it all from scratch. So I think I'm on a sort of a half and half way with that, is that absolutely, let's not throw it all out and start again. Let's utilize what we've got, but there are some big things that will have nudged that into some new directions.
Thanks, Adam. Martin and then Roger.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And what you're detecting here, and I'll add to, is a bit of a lack of appetite to completely redo the whole thing and resubmit ourselves to the pain of last time, because I was involved in Talbot, Swansea and Bridgend, actually, as it happens. And as we've discussed, I've recalled the contributions that we made as an organisation. You know, I think we produced some data sets, folios for each of the 19 wellbeing assessments across the PSBs at the time. Actually, massive exercise for us. We would just want to update that really with any additions to the data, by way of maybe doing some providing some killer facts, really, because I don't think we've shifted the dial massively on any of our 4 theme areas or topic areas since then. So I don't think there's a need to undo it completely. I'd support the thinking around potentially doing something jointly across the footprint of either the health board or, you know, which is the same as our footprint, my footprint anyway, my geographical responsibility, or certainly across Neath Patrol, but maybe. Steve, just to add to your paper, thanks for that. It's great analysis. I'd add that had we got our timing right into the Environment Act and Wellbeing Future Generations Act, the Environment Act came in 2016, and with it came a requirement to produce area statements of natural resource management as well. So they've come in since then, and there's a statutory requirement for wellbeing assessments now to consider formally those area statements and to incorporate that thinking. So we published those area statements across Wales in April this year. So I'll make sure you've got a link to that, okay, because that needs to be statutorily brought into our consideration. And again, I don't think it'll add a huge amount more. One of the things that I said, Joe, at the time of the 3 years I was involved in was that, you know, NRW's seat at the table here, when I'm representing us at this PSB, I bring with me the entire capability of our organisation, 1,900 people. So we've got, you know, lots of ologists, lots of technical input. We've got behavioural scientists that we can bring to the party as well. So my contribution, I can, you know, in terms of the resourcing, Adam, I will, you know, bring what's needed here, because I do recognise the resource difficulties you've got as an authority, and we'll make sure that we contribute fully to this. But I'd hope in a kind of light touch approach to this.
Thanks, Martin. Roger?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to echo a lot of those sentiments, really, it's been said, and I think for those who've been through the pain before, excuse me, if you hang around long enough, everything comes back into fashion. That's why I'm hanging on to my flares and whatever. But yeah, we've been through this. I think it's very much a refresh rather than a restart. Is very much, I think, where we're coming from. Some great work that's gone on. Steve's certainly, you know, we've got the benchmark data. We've got that. I don't think the world has significantly changed. Clearly, there are, you know, some current issues that we're dealing with. I don't think we'll fully understand the impact of Brexit by the time we need to produce the document. That still will be very much in the ether. I think we'll have a better understanding, but I don't think we'll fully understand it. I don't think we'll fully understand the impact of COVID either. I think that will obviously have to sort of emerge from whatever the next couple of years looks like. But yeah, very much full support. If I can, I probably align myself with Joe and with Martin and other people on the call as well, in terms of the impact on a relatively small organisation across multiple PSBs. It is we find ourselves, you know, divided and split up into, you know, so our resources are managed across a bigger geographical area, which is challenging. So yeah, anything we can do in a joined up way, which we are starting to do. I've got to say, Joanna talked about the things around substance misuse and suicide prevention, which we have a lot of good work we're doing on a joint basis. But, you know, really encourage that sort of joint working as we move forward. Yeah, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Roger. I'm going to bring in Phil and then Adam, and then I'll bring this item to a close because I'm conscious we've got 3 other agenda items to go. Phil?
Okay, I'll be very brief then, Andrea. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I agree with the idea of kind of like reviewing rather than starting from scratch. That would seem a little bit pointless, while still taking care to ensure that anything new is taken into account. I just want to mention 2 things. One thing that Joanne referred to, clearly very keen to move from assessment to action, and understand that and share that point of view. But we've got 2 processes, 2 distinct separate processes here. One is to develop the wellbeing assessment, and then to utilise that and any other information such as the area statements and so on, to then develop the new wellbeing plan for Swansea. And it's the wellbeing plan that then would actually be the thing that would lead to identifying actions and so on. The other thing that I just wanted to also raise is the concept of the ways of working, which should not really just be applied at the delivery stage. So things like involvement and collaboration should really be factors that are taken into account in the preparation of the wellbeing assessment, and most definitely factored into the process of developing the wellbeing plan itself when we get to that. So how we involve the public in providing us with the information relating to the assessment, and how we widen the collaboration beyond the statutory members and the others on the joint committee to ensure that we have the widest collaboration we can at both those stages, I think is really important, Chair.
Thank you, Phil. Adam?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, don't disagree with what Phil's saying there. Absolutely right. And in terms of wider collaboration, definitely need to. What we need to make sure, though, is that wider collaboration, that they actually bring the resource to us as well, that it's not just fed to them. So it's great collaborating so long as they've got the resources in order to be able to respond, have the knowledge and the time and the commitment in order to be able to do it. So we need to work with our partners, but bearing in mind, if we're only doing a light touch, we also don't have the machine in order to go out to massive consultation. So it's a fine balance that we need to get between the two. What we'd expect to happen is that we'd utilise the partners that we've already got, because they already have their consultation mechanisms, and we'd expect them to utilise those and do that on behalf of the PSB. So, whether it's the health board in terms of any focus groups or networks they have, whether it's Natural Resources Wales and so on, we'd be looking to push it out to them and then take it on. So far, if I can be a little bit critical, we haven't always had that return back from partners in terms of being able to push it out and make it happen. And so hence why this is all being flagged up now, is saying, yeah, absolutely, we can do all this, but we need you to lead on those aspects and deliver on them. The final bit from me is that we are still waiting, though, to hear from Welsh Government about what they want us to do on these wellbeing assessments. So until we know what they're telling us, what the true requirement is, we're still in a bit of a limbo situation, because we don't want to start anything and progress to find that we're wasting time doing things that aren't needed. And there's also the current review that many of you may well have been involved in, and I was at the Welsh Government earlier this week with regard to reviewing the Future Generations Act, and what does that mean, and what's the future of that. And that's going through quite a big review to see what value does it have and how should it move forward. That will need to come into this also.
Okay, thank you, Adam. Very quickly, Martin.
I can see you groaning. I'm sorry, my son's on the piano in the background. I just flag here that, were it not for the PSB, I wouldn't have had a seat at the table and be able to use the evidence that came through from the initial wellbeing assessment to ensure that the wellbeing plan creates and establishes a commitment within the PSB to develop a green infrastructure strategy that is intended to deliver the long-term goals that the wellbeing plan envisages. So that's one of the benefits that came through from the assessment and the plan. And I'll be looking when we review and do our assessment to see the extent to which in the last 5 years we've managed to push that forward, because it's central to what we are trying to do as a PSB.
Thanks, Martin. That's a really key point. Joanne?
Just quickly, I was going to say, no, I totally agree with Adam in terms of the need to focus and the need to lead the multi-agency basis. But in order to do that, the things which are identified as actions have to be things of that are seen as of mutual benefit and something that should be pushed forward on a multi-agency basis, not just the things we were meant to be doing anyway. And I think from that point of view, that's the bit that I think we struggled with last time. And I don't mean just this PSB, but generally in terms of that. It's the bits which make a difference that we wouldn't be doing anyway. And I think Martin has given a really good example there of where that's worked. I'm not quite sure that's the same in some of the other things. So I do think that for me, whatever we have to do about the assessment is fine and dandy. Personally, I suppose it's just a plea to spend the time framing and agreeing the what we're going to do bit, because I think last time we spent an awful lot of time doing the assessment and we then rushed into the so what are we going to do. and that led to a bit of lack of focus. So it was just, if we could learn for that, I think this time that would stand us all in better stead, really.
Thank you, Joanna. I don't think there isn't a consensus on that. I could see a lot of people nodding. So with that, I'm going to bring the item to a close, but for members who haven't had an opportunity to read the report, if you do have any questions, if you want to email through to Steve, I'm sure he'd be happy to take those on board. But this is a work in progress, it's fair to say, and until we hear from Welsh Government, it'll remain ambiguous, for want of a better word. Okay, so straight over to you, Adam, for the Natural Resource Wales funding update, please.
Thank you, Chair. So you'll all remember that Martin kindly brought it from Natural Resources Wales a £25,000 pot that we could utilise across the PSB partners in order to help deliver some of the climate, but more wider economic and beneficial changes that we can do. So there was an application process that was reviewed by the four partners, the four statutory partners, in terms of what bids came in. I'm pleased to say that we've managed to commit the full 25,000. So these had to be shovel ready in order to be able to deliver within this financial year to March 31st. So in terms of the commitment from the PSB agreement, which was delegated down to that funding group, was that fire breaks for deliberate fires on common land was given £8,000. Nature Recovery Awareness and Action Project was given £7,500. Part of that is an admin responsibility. SEF was given £8,000 for the Working with Nature Task Group support, and I probably won't say this right, but Crimlin Bog East Side Project is been given £1,500 to look at how community engagement can happen and be improved. I must practice my Welsh better than I've been doing just recently. So that's the 25k. So that's committed, subject to everyone just agreeing today. Obviously, all partners are involved somewhere in there, so I'm not sure how we get over conflict of interest. So I'd probably look for the wider partnership to say, anybody got any objections to that in terms of those being allocated?
Thanks, Adam. The pronunciation wasn't a bad stab at it at all.
Thank you very much.
Okay, does anybody have any issues with what's been proposed? I'm not seeing any hands up, and I'm not seeing anybody indicating, so I take that as approval from the group. Thank you very much. I'm going to move swiftly on, Adam, to the Poverty Truth Commission. I think we may have, I know we've got Sean on the line. Have we got Anthony? Yes. So
yes.
Very quickly, I do apologise, we haven't got very long left.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to be as very quick as I can. I'm going to give you an update on Swansea Poverty Truth Commission, tell you where we are now. I'm going to give you a recap of what Poverty Truth Commissions are, for anyone in the room who doesn't know. But first of all, I just want to put it in context of why I think this is important for PSB, and we appreciate the invite today. Joseph Rowntree Foundation estimates that poverty costs public services £69 billion a year. That's broken down, just to give you some of the other figures there. So it's estimated that poverty costs health £28 billion a year, police and criminal justice £8 billion a year, education £11 billion, social care £4 billion, children's services £7 billion. The list goes on. So I just wanted to give that as a little bit of context as to why tackling poverty is so important for everyone. So a little bit of recap on Poverty Truth Commissions and what's happening in Swansea. So Poverty Truth Commissions are about bringing changing communities, organisations, behaviours and attitudes towards poverty, and then taking action to tackle it. Poverty Truth Commissions bring together key decision makers with people who have direct lived experience of poverty. who are the experts through experience. So a Poverty Truth Commission is typically made up of 15 community commissioners and 15 civic and business commissioners. Key issues are identified and worked through over a limited timescale, which would be 18 months from the launch of the commission. Poverty Truth Commissions ensure that those that are affected by decision making are central to decision making. So update in terms of where we are now. When it was decided to launch or to start a Poverty Truth Commission in Swansea, and this would be the first Poverty Truth Commission in Wales, a multi-agency startup group was established. SCVS were identified or selected as the host organisation. A facilitation team was recruited, and we've got Sian on the line here as well. She might be able to answer some more detailed questions if there are any questions following. And that team are currently going through a process of identifying potential commissioners. Now, this has been very much hampered by COVID. We've heard a lot about the impact of COVID this afternoon, and this has had an impact on that. So we are struggling through that, and you know, are fairly limited to using digital resources to achieve that. I'd like to bring to your attention that PSB members have been invited to an event that is taking place, a virtual event on the 23rd of October. An event invitation has gone out. And during that event, one of the key important things, yes, we're going to hear about an update as to where we are in Swansea, but it's going to be an opportunity for organisations across Swansea and the public, any potential commissioners or people that might be interested in Poverty Truth Commission, to hear from the experiences of commissions from other areas. So we're having a lot of support from Leeds Poverty Truth Commission and the Poverty Truth Commission network across the UK. Some commissioners are going to be on the call, and they're going to be from businesses and civic leaders, and they're going to be members of the public, and they're going to be able to provide an insight as to what the role of being a commissioner involves, what that experience is like, and what difference it's made. So that's going to be really interesting. So I'd like to encourage all organisations, if you're available to attend that, to attend. We've also sent around some papers that have been circulated to the group that explain the role of commissioners. So I'd like to put a call out to PSB members to have a look at that and to consider if there are representatives from your organisations that might be potential commissioners. And I'd encourage you to get in touch with the facilitation team, and contact details are in those papers as well that have been circulated. We are also, we've secured enough funding to move forward and set up the facilitation team and start work, but we're not there yet for the duration of the Poverty Truth Commission in Swansea. So we're still looking for support, whether that be funding or whether that be in-kind support. So I'd also like to put out a call to the PSB to engage with the facilitation team or engage with myself about how you could potentially support the Swansea Poverty Truth Commission. I've kept it as brief as I can, Chair. If anyone has any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them. I can see Sian's got her hand up and she might have something to add.
Thank you, Anthony. Sian?
Sorry, I've always got it the wrong way round. So in terms of the handouts that we sent out, that Leanne sent out for us earlier, these are kind of some new communications that we put together because of the current situation that we're finding ourselves in, where it's difficult to meet face to face, whereas we might be normally going out to have cups of coffee and meeting with groups of people. We're very much needing to rely on organisations as kind of brokers in a way at the moment. And so the communications that we send out were designed specifically to help organisations to, when they're speaking to individuals who they may think might be interested in becoming potential commissioners. So it's to kind of, to support you with being able to speak to people about the Poverty Truth Commission. And I just wanted to say as well that, you know, people with direct experience have been involved in the start as well, and with the startup group also. So it'd be very much welcome as well that you cascading the invite to people within your organisations or individuals that you think would be interested in attending also.
Thank you, Sian. Any questions for Anthony or Sian? Not seeing anybody indicating, but obviously you don't. If you do have any questions arising after this meeting, I'm sure they'd be happy for you to contact them, and there are other links that have been circulated in handouts as well. So thank you both very much.
Andrea, sorry, it's Amanda. I think
I can't see hands. I do apologise.
Yeah, no, I think I've got it raised, but I'm not really sure. Could I just very quickly say two things? Firstly, that I think the timing of the Poverty Truth Commission works really well in terms of the wellbeing assessment and, more importantly, the action plan, because the Poverty Truth Commission is supposed to be solutions focused. So plays into some of the comments from Joe and others about let's get doing something. And then secondly, as a member of the startup group, I guess I'd be remiss if I didn't flag that the funding that is still needed is in the next financial year. And I would really hope that the PSB might be able to consider the Poverty Truth Commission within the context of the NRW funding in the next financial year.
Okay, thank you, Amanda. I think that's been heard loud and clear. I can see Amanda's hand is still up. Is anybody else indicating to speak? No? Okay, thank you both very much. And it did make for very interesting reading, and I love the fact that we're involving people who are experiencing this rather than telling them what we think we know. We're listening, and that's the most important thing with all of this. So thank you very much. Adam, before I bring you in, I'm going to ask for some serious brevity from you on this last item, because we've got literally a minute to go, and I like to finish on time wherever I can. So UK Prevention Research Partnership, call for applications. Over to you.
Wow, brevity isn't something I'm known for, but let's have a go. Okay, so in terms of UK Prevention Research Partnership, call for applications, information has been circulated to everybody. If you do want to put an application in, can you let Leanne know? But it's over to the agency putting the application in to do the work and do the application, fill all the forms out and send it through. But we do need to be aware of what you're going for. So that's that one. What was the next one, Andrea?
I think that's all that's on our agenda today.
Okay, I got one more thing that I was asked to put forward, and that's with regard to the Public Accounts Committee, asking about the Future Generations Act and the barriers to successful implementation. Again, that's been circulated to everyone. If you can send any response back, please go through it in quite detail. We do want to put, on behalf of the PSB, a response back. All the information was attached, so fill the form out, get it back to Leanne, and we'll then pull that together as a response on behalf of the PSB. But it is important, again, you know, it's about your voice coming forward to put that in. So please take the time to fill that out, because we do need to change the Future Generations Act to make it easier to implement and more beneficial in terms of what we do. And the only final one is the working groups. If we can make sure that they're still active and still happening, and please make sure that they're starting to meet again. So if you're chair of one of those groups or strategic lead, please make them happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. That was very succinct. I'm impressed. All that remains then is for me to thank you all very much for attending today. It's been a really productive and positive meeting. I'm amazed that we've crammed it all in, because it was quite a full agenda, but we got there, and we got there almost on time. We've just run over by a few minutes. So if I don't see you before, I look forward to seeing you all on the 10th of December. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Stay safe.
Thank you.